Few films have captured the imagination of audiences and critics quite like The Silence of the Lambs, 1991. Not only did it terrify millions, but it also changed the landscape of cinema forever. The chilling story of Clarice Starling and Dr. Hannibal Lecter continues to fascinate viewers more than 3 decades later. But behind the scenes, the movie is packed with strange details, shocking discoveries, and fascinating trivia that many fans don't know. Today, we'll explore weird facts about The Silence of the Lambs that will make you see this masterpiece in a whole new light. The role of Hannibal Lecter almost went to someone else. When you think of Hannibal Lecter, you probably picture Anthony Hopkins with his piercing eyes and chilling calmness. But did you know he wasn't the first choice for the role? Before Hopkins, several other actors were considered, including Sean Connery, Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, and even Dustin Hoffman. Each of them turned it down for different reasons. Connery thought the script was too disgusting, while others simply couldn't imagine playing a cannibal. Director Jonathan Demme eventually cast Hopkins, who was still relatively unknown in Hollywood at the time. Ironically, Hopkins' performance became so iconic that it completely overshadowed these other actors. Imagine Sean Connery saying, "Hello, Clarice." With his accent, it just wouldn't have worked. Hopkins studied real-life serial killers and predators to nail down Lecter's presence, combining charm, intelligence, and menace in a way no one else could. His performance won him an Academy Award for Best Actor, even though he was only on screen for about 16 minutes. That's one of the shortest performances ever to win an Oscar. The weirdest part? Hopkins initially thought he was being offered a role in a children's movie. When he first saw the script's title, he thought The Silence of the Lambs sounded like a kid's story. Instead, it became his most legendary role, and one of the greatest performances in film history. Jodie Foster wasn't the first choice for Clarice Starling. It's hard to imagine anyone else as Clarice Starling, the determined FBI trainee who seeks Hannibal Lecter's help to catch Buffalo Bill. But surprisingly, Jodie Foster wasn't the studio's first pick. Michelle Pfeiffer was offered the role first, but she turned it down because she felt the film was too dark and disturbing. Other names floated included Meg Ryan and Laura Dern, both of whom also passed for similar reasons. Jodie Foster, however, had been lobbying for the role for years. She had read Thomas Harris's novel and immediately connected with Clarice as a character. Foster fought to convince the studio and director that she was right for the part, and ultimately won the role that would change her career forever. Her performance earned her an Academy Award for Best Actress, making her one of the youngest 2-time Oscar winners in history at that time. The weirdest thing is that Jodie Foster admitted she struggled during filming because Anthony Hopkins' performance scared her so much. During their scenes together, she rarely looked directly at him because she found his intensity overwhelming. That very fear and tension bled into her performance, making Clarice's interactions with Lecter all the more authentic and chilling. Foster later said that she and Hopkins barely spoke off camera during production, keeping their distance to preserve the uneasy relationship audiences see in the film. Hannibal Lecter never actually says, "Hello, Clarice." One of the most quoted lines in movie history, "Hello, Clarice," is actually a Mandela effect. Fans swear that Anthony Hopkins says it in the movie, but if you go back and rewatch, the line doesn't exist. Instead, Lecter greets Clarice with "Good evening" during their first meeting. The false memory became so widespread that even Hopkins himself has repeated the line in interviews, and it's been parodied endlessly in pop culture. This phenomenon shows how powerful and memorable the film's atmosphere was, even without that specific phrase. In fact, The Silence of the Lambs is full of subtle lines that became iconic. Another example is Lecter's chilling, "I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti." Hopkins added his own touch by making that disturbing slurping noise at the end, which wasn't in the script but became unforgettable. The Mandela effect around "Hello, Clarice" demonstrates how pop culture sometimes collectively rewrites films in our memory. Audiences remember the sinister tone, Hopkins' piercing delivery, and the eerie close-ups, so their brains fill in the blanks with a simple, sinister greeting. It's a weird case where a movie quote that doesn't exist became more famous than many that actually do. Anthony Hopkins based Lecter's voice on unexpected sources. One of the weirdest aspects of Hannibal Lecter's character is his haunting voice, calm, deliberate, and chillingly polite. Anthony Hopkins revealed that he based this voice on a mix of unusual inspirations. He said he wanted Lecter's tone to feel both soothing and terrifying at the same time, like a predator luring its prey. Surprisingly, Hopkins drew inspiration from HAL 9000, the emotionless computer from 2001, A Space Odyssey. He also added touches of Truman Capote's soft, high-pitched speech patterns, giving Lecter a strangely unsettling refinement. Hopkins spoke with perfect diction, never raising his voice, which made his words even scarier. He deliberately avoided blinking during many of his scenes, giving the impression of a predatory animal always watching. This technique was so effective that even Jodie Foster admitted she felt deeply unsettled whenever he looked at her during filming. Hopkins also said he added a hint of Katharine Hepburn's crisp delivery to Lecter's voice, an odd but effective choice. The result was a sound that felt strangely familiar, yet horrifyingly alien. This bizarre combination of influences helped Lecter stand out from every other villain in movie history. His voice has since become one of the most imitated in pop culture, proving that sometimes the scariest thing isn't a shout or a growl, it's a soft, polite whisper hiding pure menace. The real FBI helped make the movie accurate. The Silence of the Lambs feels authentic when it comes to FBI procedure, and that's no accident. The filmmakers worked closely with the FBI to ensure everything looked realistic. The Bureau saw the film as a chance to recruit more women into their ranks, especially since Clarice Starling was such a strong female protagonist. Jodie Foster trained with real FBI agents, learning how to hold her gun, enter a room tactically, and conduct interrogations. She even spent time at the FBI Academy in Quantico, studying how trainees operated in real life. The film's depiction of profiling, though dramatized, was based on genuine techniques the behavioral science unit used when analyzing serial killers. In fact, the character of Jack Crawford, played by Scott Glenn, was loosely based on FBI profiler John Douglas, one of the pioneers of criminal profiling. Glenn spent time with Douglas and even listened to recordings of real-life killers describing their crimes. That experience left him deeply disturbed, and he later said he never fully shook the darkness he felt. The FBI's involvement gave the movie a sense of credibility that separated it from other thrillers of the time. Ironically, while they wanted the film to inspire recruitment, what audiences remember most are the terrifying villains Hannibal Lecter and Buffalo Bill. Still, the weird fact remains: the FBI actively supported this horror thriller as a form of PR. Buffalo Bill was inspired by multiple real killers. The character of Buffalo Bill, played by Ted Levine, is one of the most disturbing villains ever put on screen. What many don't realize is that he wasn't based on a single real-life killer, but rather a combination of several. Thomas Harris, the author of the novel, drew from infamous murderers like Ed Gein, Ted Bundy, and Gary Heidnik. Ed Gein was notorious for making clothing out of human skin, which inspired Buffalo Bill's gruesome woman suit. Bundy often lured women by pretending to be injured and asking for help, just like Bill does when he tricks his victim into helping him load a couch into his van. Gary Heidnik kept women trapped in his basement, echoing the horrifying pit where Bill holds his victims. Ted Levine gave the character a chilling depth, but he later admitted that playing Buffalo Bill nearly ruined his career. He became so associated with the disturbing role that casting directors hesitated to hire him afterward. Levine even tried to humanize Bill by showing moments of vulnerability, like his bizarre dance scene in front of the mirror. That unsettling sequence wasn't in the original script. It was inspired by the book and improvised during filming. The weirdness of Buffalo Bill lies in how he's a terrifying composite of multiple real monsters, brought to life in a way that feels both unreal and disturbingly possible. The infamous Chianti line was almost different. One of the most quoted lines from The Silence of the Lambs is Hannibal Lecter's chilling remark, "I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti." What many people don't realize is how weird and layered that line really is. First, the delivery itself. Anthony Hopkins makes a strange sucking sound at the end, a creepy hiss that wasn't scripted. He improvised it, and it instantly became iconic. Second, the drink choice of Chianti is medically significant. In real life, a person taking a certain type of antidepressant medication called monoamine oxidase inhibitors wouldn't be able to consume liver, fava beans, or wine without dangerous side effects. By mentioning those three things, Lecter is slyly suggesting that he doesn't take his prescribed medication, making him even more dangerous. Interestingly, in Thomas Harris's novel, Lecter actually says Amarone, a more sophisticated wine, but director Jonathan Demme and Hopkins decided that Chianti sounded more sinister and recognizable. The change paid off, giving us one of cinema's creepiest lines. Jodie Foster later admitted that the hiss Hopkins added gave her chills even after multiple takes. The weird fact here is that a simple improvisation and a swap of wine names turned an already disturbing moment into something unforgettable. It's proof that sometimes the smallest creative choices can leave the biggest cultural footprint. Jodie Foster and Anthony Hopkins barely spoke off camera. Despite their incredible on-screen chemistry, Jodie Foster and Anthony Hopkins hardly interacted outside of filming. Foster later explained that she was genuinely terrified of Hopkins when he was in character as Hannibal Lecter. She avoided casual conversation with him because she didn't want to break the tension she felt during their scenes together. Hopkins, for his part, respected that distance and stayed mostly in character while filming. Their first major scene together, where Clarice meets Lecter in his cell, was filmed early in the production. Foster recalled feeling an intense chill run down her spine as Hopkins stared at her without blinking. That real fear translated onto the screen, adding authenticity to Clarice's unease. After the movie wrapped, Foster finally confessed to Hopkins that she was too scared to talk to him during production. Hopkins thought that was hilarious, though he admitted he enjoyed the effect it had on their performances. It's a weird fact, because audiences often assume actors bond closely behind the scenes, especially when they deliver such powerful performances together. But in this case, their emotional distance off-camera helped create one of the most chilling and believable dynamics in film history: the relentless predator and the vulnerable yet determined trainee. Hannibal Lecter only appears for 16 minutes. When people think of The Silence of the Lambs, they instantly picture Hannibal Lecter. Yet here's the weirdest part. He's only on screen for about 16 minutes total. That's less than 10% of the entire film. Despite this, Anthony Hopkins' performance was so powerful that it dominated the movie and won him the Academy Award for Best Actor. This is one of the shortest screen times ever for a lead actor Oscar win. What makes it even stranger is how much presence Lecter has, despite his limited scenes. Director Jonathan Demme shot his conversations with Clarice in an unusual way. Hopkins often looks directly into the camera, making it feel like he's staring into the audience's soul. That technique made his short screen time incredibly intense. Hopkins himself said he wanted every second of Lecter's appearance to feel deliberate and unforgettable, and he succeeded. Viewers often remember Lecter's face, his words, and his menace as if he dominated the entire film. This weird fact shows the incredible power of a performance that uses restraint. Hopkins didn't need hours of dialogue. Just a few chilling minutes were enough to cement Hannibal Lecter as one of the greatest villains in movie history. The film swept the Big Five Oscars. The final weird fact about The Silence of the Lambs is also one of its most impressive. At the 1992 Academy Awards, the film achieved something extremely rare. It won the Big Five Oscars. Best Picture, Best Director, Jonathan Demme. Best Actor, Anthony Hopkins. Best Actress, Jodie Foster. And Best Adapted Screenplay, Ted Talley. Only two other films in history had accomplished this before. It happened One Night, 1934, and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, 1975. What makes it even weirder is that The Silence of the Lambs was released in February 1991, nearly a full year before the Oscars. Usually, films released early in the year are forgotten by award season, but not this one. Its cultural impact was so massive that it stayed in the conversation all year long. Critics praised its mix of horror, thriller, and drama, something the Academy usually avoids rewarding. The fact that such a dark, disturbing film swept the top Oscars shocked many Hollywood insiders. To this day, it remains the only horror film to win Best Picture, proving that sometimes the scariest stories can also be the most critically acclaimed. This weird fact cements The Silence of the Lambs as both a cultural phenomenon and an awards powerhouse.